telling me, but I did
Figure that
connect
out.
my YouTube. I'll upload it if not. And then
Okay.
let's go live on Instagram and I'll get you
Is it
added in.
terrible to say that I didn't even know you could go live on YouTube? I thought you could only upload to YouTube. So I just
Oh,
learned
really?
something new today.
Okay, that's okay. We are. All right, let me add you.
Okay. I joined.
Invite. Okay, I invited you. Let's see if that works. Hello. Thank you guys so much for joining. Hi, Millie's Raleigh. Okay.
I'm here. Oh, but I'm like, you can't really see me.
Here we go.
There we go. That's
I know. I feel like I'm like way up on the camera.
I know.
There. Guys, I have a new mic also. So let me know if you can hear me on Instagram. And then I have no idea if YouTube is live. We'll figure that out at some point. But we're talking about what's really in your pet's food today. And Kara with Raw Paw Adventures is joining me. So I'm just going to get us started. Thank you so much for letting me know you can hear me. So Consumer Reports just recently, their first ever report on dog food nutrition. They tested 58 different foods for protein, fat, vitamin D, copper, and fiber. Some of which is listed on the bag. So they like the protein, the fat, the fiber, they were comparing to make sure like what was in the food matched what was in the bag. And there's a lot. This was their first ever report on dog food as far as like the nutrition, doing testing on nutrition of dog food. And yeah, so what are your first I thought it would just be a good like jumping off point to talk about what's in what do we even actually know what's in our dog's food? And I think a lot of times we don't.
I think the answer is no, and I think that their answer also was no once they were done with their testing. I think my overall takeaway from this article was that, and if you guys saw, I made a reel on my page like last week or something like that because there were some news reports. Is that the word that I'm looking for? Some news reports, some news articles?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, where they kind of like took their information from the written article and they put it on the news. So I made a little blurb of that video. But I think the answer is that you're not always going to know what's in your pet food, which is kind of scary. There's a much higher likelihood that you're going to know what's in it if it's actually human grade food, right? Food grade food, not feed grade food. And that will always be the case across the board. But what they tested, I think, are important components. And they did a pretty good job of breaking things down. There were some things I agreed with, there were some things I disagreed with. There were some statements that they made that I think would be good to unpack. But it was a pretty in-depth article. It wasn't insanely long, although I have to admit, because I didn't have a login for this, it didn't let me go past toward when you were getting to the end where they had the chart of everything.
Oh my gosh. You should have
Couldn't
said
see it.
something to me because I had it.
Oh no. Well, you can talk about that part.
Okay. Well, they emailed me. And so I emailed them back because I had questions and then I couldn't see it. So they sent me like how to log in and get it for press to see what was on the bottom, which I mean, it's just the numbers for everything that they talked about. So it's not a whole lot more than what you would get if you just read the article, which when I mean, I can post the link to the article in my stories when we're done with this, but
for sure.
So, I mean, I think it's a good, I'm glad they did it insofar as like it's bringing even more awareness to people about not really knowing what's in their pet's food. And I think that, so many people just kind of for so many different things, but you know, our focus really is on pet food. Like just kind of walk through life with like, well, this is the food my vet recommends, and so this is what I'm going to feed. When in reality, we all have those stories about, not all, but most veterinarians just don't, you know, nutrition is an area where they just don't have education. And it would be nice if they did, but they don't. And one of the things that and this is like a tangent, I'm going to go on for a second, but one of the things that I find really, really interesting, and it was recently brought up again because I was interviewing Dr. PJ Broadfoot, and her whole family are like human medical doctors. And so when she decided to become a veterinarian, they were like, oh my God, why would you do that? Right. And it reminded me about how humans, people that go through, and you can attest to this because you've been through human medical training a lot, you're learning one species. But when you're going to veterinary school, you're having to learn everything for a plethora of species. So it's like, I feel like it is so much more. And like human medicine doctors kind of look down on veterinarians. And I feel like it should almost be the other way around. Like I know so many more species.
So much.
Right?
But across the board, it doesn't matter if you're a conventional veterinarian, a medical doctor, a doctor of osteopathy, a nurse practitioner, a physician assistant. We get minimal nutrition education in school. Minimal.
Yeah. Well, and that is the reality. And I say, you know, my story all the time is that I started feeding some fresh food to my animals. I knew that it wasn't balanced, so I was still feeding kibble. And I went to my vet and I said, I don't want to feed kibble anymore. Can you help me? And he said, I don't know, maybe add tomatoes. And that literally blew up my whole world. Like I spent my whole life thinking, like doing every single thing that my vet told me to do because I trusted them implicitly. And that one statement like literally blew up my whole world. And everything I thought I knew, everything that I trusted my veterinarians to know. And so I think what this kind of research does, not that I'm the biggest fan, I mean, I think Consumer Reports does a decent job of like trying to just put factual information out into the world for people to make better decisions on purchases, regardless of what that is. If it's an automobile or an air conditioner or whatever. And now they're getting into pet food as well, which makes sense because it's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. I'm kind of surprised they waited this long to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't want to overtake the conversation, but
but you're right. Like, you're right.
It's insofar as getting people to start thinking about what they're actually feeding. Because I think so often, I don't know about you, but I hear people just kind of one off, whether I'm like just overhearing people talking or seeing people on social media, which doesn't happen as much anymore because I deleted Facebook. But they like, most people implicitly trust Purina specifically. They have done such a good job of marketing. And what I found, one of the most interesting things I found, it wasn't a Purina, it was Pedigree, but their vitamin D levels were toxic.
Yeah, 5 times the upper acceptable limit for AAFCO. So AAFCO recommends 500 to 3,000 IUs is what they said in there. And the one by Pedigree had 14,500. And their only response to that was, our food is safe. That was their response. Like, yeah, that's not even a response.
Well, that's actually what I emailed Consumer Reports back about because, and maybe I misunderstood the article, but as I was reading through it, they contacted the FDA on something else we can talk about in a little bit, but I didn't get the feeling that they contacted the FDA about these vitamin D levels when I was reading the article. So I that's what I replied to them, and I was like, WTF? Like, what you contacted the FDA about, whatever, it's going to cause some minor illness maybe, but these levels of vitamin D can cause serious harm and death in a lot of animals, and you didn't contact the FDA about that. And they replied and said that they did contact the FDA, which I personally think they should be a little bit more
transparent,
forthright, with that information in the article, because to me, and the other thing that they contacted the FDA about was finding some listeria, I believe, in 2 raw food products, and I'm like, are you out of it? But to me, the way that reads to a consumer who doesn't know anything about anything is that, oh my God, they had to contact the FDA because listeria is so horrible. Yet, I guess the vitamin D isn't that bad because they're not contacting the FDA about it. And I'm like, no, it's like completely the opposite.
I could see how reading that somebody could be like, oh, there was extra vitamin D in here. I don't know. Maybe that's good for my dog. I'm deficient in vitamin D, right? Like unless you spell out, hey, 5 times the upper acceptable limit is actually dangerous, people don't realize that. And one of the things that they say right at the beginning of the article, which I completely agree with, is that most pet parents don't know how to read dog food packages. That's true. Before I learned how to do all this and I became a nutritionist, I distinctly remember my dog, I determined through trial and error that he had a chicken allergy because he was having diarrhea all the time. So
you and 8 million other
smart
people.
Little consumer. So I took myself up to PetSmart and I went through the aisles and I went over to the Purina section where they had golden retrievers on the bags because I had a golden retriever. And I said, all right, well, I need a novel protein, so I'm going to grab lamb and rice instead of chicken and rice. Well, if I would have done more than just look at the front of the bag, which had cutlets of meat and, tomatoes and vegetables on it, and flipped it over and looked halfway down the ingredient list, I would have seen that lamb and rice was still sprayed with chicken fat. So there's no, there's no, you can't just look at the pretty picture and take it home. And that's true for people food too. And I hate even calling it like human food because really it should just be, there's human grade food and there's feed grade food. So there's real food and there's crap. But, if you're at the grocery store for yourself, it's the same thing. You can't just look at the pretty picture on the cover. It's very deceiving.
Yeah, that actually, I don't know why I hadn't thought of this before, but because there is a push, and I think it's too small of a push at this point, but I know Susan Thixton has been working on this tirelessly to get the FDA in pet food specifically to distinguish, to require the packaging to either say feed or food, depending on the grade. But I feel like we should do that with human food too. Like,
There's so much that we need to do with human food. Yeah. But they even are giving them like 6 years to convert to writing the carbohydrate content on the bags, right?
They were until AFCO, until they didn't renew the MOU. And so I think from that they bumped it up to like 18 months.
Oh,
which was just the end of last summer, I think that happened. So it should happen a lot quicker, though who the heck knows right now? I don't know. But the other thing sticking on the vitamin D is that there was a Stella and Chewy's product that had way less vitamin D than, well, not way less, but less than the minimum requirement for AFCO. So it went in both directions with vitamin D.
And one thing to remember too is you can have degradation of vitamins and minerals and things that are synthetic and in real food if it sits for a long time or if it's processed or if it's exposed to air. So I'm not entirely surprised to see that something had a somewhat lower level. I think their level was 250 and the low accepted minimum is 500. So, it's significant. But I could see why that might push some companies even to put more because maybe they think it's going to degrade. I don't know. It seems like there must be a better way to do this, like feeding real food.
Yeah, right. I know. Well, and I think what concerns me the most about pedigree, specifically having the 5 times the maximum allowable, is that we have seen so many times in the past these huge recalls from what ultimately winds up being what we find out to be that they're not testing the premix, the vitamin and mineral premix pack that they're getting prior to using it, and then they're not testing the food before it leaves the facility, which they are supposed to do. In both instances, they're supposed to be doing. But also, and I don't know how much this has been talked about, like in the past handful of years, 3 years, I don't know what the deal is with the FDA. I mean, I think we talk a lot about how we feel like they target raw food companies, but the recalls on kibble have been significantly less. And Susan Thixton has kind of talked about this, but that concerns me even more, because it's not just, oh, let's attack raw food companies. It's like favoritism to companies that are not, do not have the best interest of your pets in mind. And when I say raw food companies, I do think it's always important to remember that just because it's a raw food doesn't mean it's an exceptional product. The companies that Kara and I recommend, I feel like are exceptional products, but you still have to do your research even with a raw food company, because there are raw foods out there that still use and fresh foods that you get in the refrigerated section that use vitamin and mineral premixes that are, so that's still an issue. You still have to be careful, but I think, I don't know, would you like to talk more about what people should be looking for, or I don't know.
Yeah. No, let's do that. So a couple of things that stand out to me with this too, that they said that, and again, these are things I agree with, is that not all dog foods are created equal. So that kind of piggybacks off of what you just said, right? Sure, it could be a fresh food, like some of the ones that have been advertised on the Super Bowl commercials and are all over television. We can think of what those are now, right? You can go to your local grocery store and they're in the refrigerated section, and they might even say the word fresh on the label. That does not mean that it's real food. So knowing where it's coming from is very important. And you can do a quick Google search or open up ChatGPT and say, who is so-and-so owned by? And if it comes up that they're owned by Mars or Colgate Palmolive, or, then I put it back. But if it's a small independent company that is doing their damnedest to bring you the best possible food on the market because they're actually invested and they care about your pet, and most of the time it's because something happened to their own pet that spurred them into action, into creating something because there was a hole in the market, right? So those are the companies that you want to buy from, the ones that own themselves. And then you want to be looking for things like human grade, organic if you can find it. Looking at, do they say the carbohydrate content? Some of them do. Something that's really important, though, that I think does get overlooked, this isn't really the focus of this conversation, but carbohydrate has started to get a really bad rap. Carbs don't mean starch and calories. Carbs can mean fiber. Broccoli is a carb. Spinach is a carb, right? But also so are white potatoes. So knowing the carbohydrates that are in there is actually more important than knowing the total carbohydrate content, in my opinion. So it can take a lot. Another great thing to look out for are people like Jessica and I, so that you can read our blogs and listen to us talk, and we can help break this stuff down for you, So it's hard. But yeah, packaging, can't rely on just the packaging. You can't rely on just the name of the brand. Look and see who owns that brand, and know what is species appropriate for your pet. Because you know what a dog and cat should be eating, right? They're carnivores. Obligate versus facultative, we can have that argument another day, but at the end of the day, they have pointed canines, they don't have any flat molars, they are carnivores, and they should be eating mostly meat and protein with a little bit of carbs. And that's the best way to determine what's in your pet's food, is it species appropriate?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think a couple of years ago, I started trying to switch what I was saying away from just carbs and carbohydrates to starchy carbs and carbohydrates, trying to still keep it simplified for people, but switching their mindset a little bit, because I mostly am talking about like grains and legumes and things like that's what I really more often than not don't want to be feeding a dog, and certainly not a cat. Though I will say, I posted in my stories the other night, my cat, Sissy, has not been feeling well the past couple of days and not eating much. And so I just cooked some chicken breast in like salt and pepper, garlic powder, olive oil. Like there wasn't anything else on it. And a sweet potato with a bunch of butter. And she like ate a third of my chicken breast off of my plate, and then she went for the sweet potato, and I'm like, what are you doing? But I'm like, whatever, just eat the sweet. I think she was going for the butter, but
probably. But I mean, there's a line, right, between what am I trying to feed my very healthy animal who has a great appetite that I'm trying to keep healthy, and I have a pet who's not really feeling great, and I am desperate to get anything possible into their stomach.
Oh my gosh.
Give them all the
Let me tell you.
they want. Like,
let me tell you, I'm in desperation mode at the moment with her. But I mean, I say that to say that I'm not 100% strict on anything either. Like, yes, my cat is an obligate. Yeah, my cat is an obligate carnivore, but there are times when eat what you're going to eat, honey.
I'm going to make a t-shirt out of that just says, let him eat the sweet potato. I'll wear it around Super Zoo and you'll see me and you'll be like, but I do agree with you, what you said about the recalls, because something that really scares me is this exact time 1 year ago, we all knew that there was some craziness going on, and we all sat here with bated breath waiting for a recall, begging for a recall. Multiple states, countless pet advocates begged our governing bodies to do something because we saw thousands of animals dying, and we thought we knew where it was coming from, but doors were closed in everyone's faces. Certain vets that we know spent thousands upon thousands of out-of-pocket dollars to do independent testing, and they just couldn't find what they were looking for. And the problem is, it could be any number of things causing problems, and you don't have infinite resources to test 1,000 different things. You could be testing for aflatoxins, you could be testing for heavy metals, for vitamin toxicity, mineral toxicity, poisons, rat poison. I mean, so many things, right? And one person cannot possibly pay out of pocket to test all of those things. And when you don't get help from the agencies that you're supposed to trust with your pet's health, then where are you supposed to turn? And I think the answer is to the people that are sitting here screaming louder, advocate for me. And a recall never came. And that makes me so angry, because we know that something went wrong. We know that it happened, but there will never be official documentation of it. And the fact that things like that seem to be slipping through the cracks, but then you have the Oregon State Department of Health breaking protocol and testing an open package for something, blows my mind. And if that doesn't sound like bullying the fresh food industry, I don't know what the F does.
Well, like I said, it's double. It's twofold, right? Because you've got the bullying, and is it a bigger picture issue, that they want people to be scared of HPAI more than necessary? I think so. Especially, it was like my sister-in-law came in the other day, and she was like, okay, why are my egg prices so high? And I'm like, let me tell you why. Because we are killing millions of healthy birds. That is why. So it's absolutely insane. But also the favoritism with companies that obviously have issues, that just because they're a huge brand name that has been around forever, that fund every freaking thing there is to fund, they get the favoritism, just like you were talking about with the brand this time last year. It, it's infuriating. Even though we couldn't, and I say we because I was helping too.
Yeah.
We couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. The fact that so many reports made their way to the FDA for sick and dead pets, that alone, we shouldn't have to prove what's wrong for the FDA to look at the numbers and say, we need to investigate.
Right.
And that is the corruption that bothers me. And that is the same corruption that ultimately is responsible for the pet food labels, which is where we started with.
Yeah, which is where, right? Yeah. But in the end, this kind of round robin framework is, my biggest fear is that it's not that raw food will go away. It won't. We're here to stay. My fear is that they're going to start bullying these companies to the point where they are backed into a corner, and then they all have to turn to things that I personally am not really looking for in a pet food. I don't want to feed HPP. I agree it's a better alternative to kibble, but that's not what I want to give to my pets. I like completely raw food. Some companies are starting to put probiotics in their food to outcompete potential pathogenic bacteria. What's the downstream effect of that? Because we should not be giving the same couple strains of probiotics every single day in every single food for the rest of our lives. That can cause dysbiosis. But we don't know. Are those bacteria surviving to the time when the food is fed? Are they surviving the acidic environment of the gut? Are they outcompeting and killing each other? We don't know, right? There's no long-term study, but because of the harshness of the testing and really kind of coming down on us, I think it's making people rush and making people take drastic measures, and that makes me more worried than anything else.
Yeah, well, and no, I agree with you. I think you're right that raw food isn't going anywhere. In fact, Colgate-Palmolive, which is Hill's, just last week purchased a raw food company in Australia. Granted, it's one of those raw food companies, I looked at it, that uses it's enough synthetic vitamins and minerals that it appears that it could be a premix. Because you can look, well, you and I can look at a pet food label and see like 2 or 3 or 4 synthetics, and we're like, okay, we know that's not a premix. But then you see this paragraph and you're like, obviously that's a premix. So this one to me looked like it was probably a premix. So still in line with how they produce pet food, but it is a raw food that they bought. So it is definitely something that it's not going anywhere, and they are showing us that it's not going anywhere by buying into it, which is also an interesting, like, I'm going to be really interested to see how they change over the years, how they're teaching veterinarians, because there are so many veterinarians right now that are absolutely 100% don't you ever dare feed a raw food to your pet, because that's what they've been taught by these huge kibble companies. And now if they're going to start making raw foods, like what are they going to tell the veterinarians to say then? I'm curious.
That's a great question.
Yeah, but so yeah, for me, when I'm looking at a food, the first thing I'm looking at is going to be the moisture content. That's the very first thing that I want to teach somebody about, because when you're feeding a dry, shelf-stable food, and granted, there are freeze-dried raws, like that exists in a category of food itself. Even that, I would rather you feed dry than feed a dry kibble, but still, I don't want you feeding that dry. That's like, so across the board, I want to talk about moisture first and foremost. I think that is probably one of the very first things that we need to get people's mind shifted
Yeah.
around, because if we can do that, then they realize that anything dry is not ideal to feed our pets. So that's my very first thing, the moisture content.
Agree. That's probably one of the most important things. And to be honest, when I talk to pet parents about macronutrients, I include water in my conversation, because although it's not providing you calories, it is, in my mind, macro as in one of the main parts of the diet is going to be moisture and hydration. So I love that you put that right up on top. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if we can, even adding liquid to kibble. So adding liquid to a freeze-dried raw food is very different than adding liquid to a kibble, because a freeze-dried raw food is designed to reabsorb that moisture, and then by the time you're feeding it, it is closer to if you were actually feeding a raw food that wasn't processed additionally in freeze drying. Mini kibbles, they are not going to absorb that moisture. So you have a texture issue that's going to, not for all dogs, but for some dogs, they're not going to like it. They may not eat it that way, or they may eat the food and leave a lot of the liquid, but you literally cannot add enough liquid to it to satiate the organs and in the digestion process.
Yeah.
So we're keeping our pets in this like chronic state of dehydration, which is bad for everything. Like literally any function of the body is going to be affected by dehydration. But then what you were saying, like I don't hang my hat on human grade ingredients when I'm looking at a food. Is it wonderful to have human grade ingredients? Yes. But I think, or like a human grade food all around, to be able to have that label of human grade. I think there are some fresh food companies that don't have that designation for like maybe 1 or 2 ingredients. And overall, the formula is still preferable for me than other foods on the market. So I don't hang my hat on that, but I do think it's a good thing to be looking at. Especially, I know there are nutritionists out there who, like, if it's not a human grade food, they don't recommend it. That's just not me. But I think, when you're doing a DIY, that's not you either, because even though you're technically buying human grade ingredients from a lot of places, the fact that they're being fed raw kind of makes them not quote unquote human grade anymore, because there is, when you buy at the grocery store, like in meats, right, there's a certain level of pathogenic bacteria that's allowed in them because they expect humans to be cooking it before they're eating it. Yeah. So technically, I don't think would be considered human grade anymore, but that's my brain going in a million directions. Yeah.
And acceptable levels of things bother me, because I don't love, so that kind of ties into an example that we didn't talk about yet that was in the article, was the aflatoxins. So they mention in the article that there was one product that had tested positive for aflatoxins, which are mold toxins. And this food had 1.5 parts per million, or like 1.8 parts per million. And apparently the acceptable maximum amount of aflatoxins is 20 parts per million. And so it's so low that the FDA would not have intervened. And the company that they found these toxins in was not mentioned. I couldn't find the food unless it was below in the chart that I couldn't view.
It's not.
So that made me mad too. But the fact that we even have allowable levels of things that are truly dangerous bothers me. Aflatoxins, mold will kill you. Mold will cause chronic respiratory issues. I mean, it can even cause dementia. It can cause autoimmune disease. Mold is bad. You don't want mold. Other things like lead. There's acceptable levels of lead for water out of your faucet. Why? Fluoride. Why? Like, why does this exist? But in other circumstances, I understand why you can't have an all or nothing mentality, and organisms are one of those things, right? So some bacteria, some viruses, some parasites, some, maybe we don't want any amoebas floating around, but you can't. I do understand why there could be acceptable levels of that in certain aspects for people because we're going to cook it, but for pets because they do have their innate kind of defenses against, and cats and dogs have innate defenses against these bacteria. If you have a high pathogenic load, sure, that's not great. We don't want that. But they should be able to tolerate some low levels of bacteria because remember, our mouth is full of bacteria. It's also full of lysosomes that kind of cleave through cell walls. The stomach is acidic. The intestines are short. You have your own microbiome. So you have a lot of things that are going to protect you. And when I keep saying you, I mean our pets. But as a human, I probably would not want to go lick a raw piece of chicken from the grocery store. I don't want to do that.
No, I definitely don't want to do that. I mean, I think, it really would be nice to live in a world where there are certain things that we could guarantee were not in our food, like aflatoxins.
Yes.
I'm sure, but do I think that we should live in a world where we can guarantee everything is completely sanitary? Like, no, we have to have something to test to keep our immune system functioning and working. We have to have these challenges. So do our pets. We have to be challenged. But I do think that a lot of these allowed limits are because of lobbying by companies who either couldn't figure out how to not have these horrible things in the food, or didn't want to spend the money to do it, or like there are so many things. I do think that's why we have a lot of these allowable limits. I hate lobbyists so much.
So I would love to talk about a couple of other things that were in this article that I staunchly disagree with.
Okay, go for it.
So the first one is that, and Sandra Fay said this, the president of the AVMA, they quoted her, that you should always talk to your vet about what food to feed and use feeds that are meeting AAFCO guidelines. I don't like that. I don't like AAFCO. I don't like their guidelines. I don't like their lack of transparency. I don't like that they are essentially here to create food, an edible product out of the human waste industry, and that they don't actually, at their core, care about the well-being of our pets. What are your thoughts?
I 100% agree with that. I think as much as I don't like AAFCO, it's all we have at the moment.
The alternative could be even scarier.
Yes, the alternative could be that these pet food companies are putting out whatever the heck they want and killing animals left and right. So in that regard, I understand, and I will say when I work with a client, I feel them out first to see if I feel like they can handle me telling them that we don't have to feed according to AAFCO requirements. If I feel like they can handle that, then I have the conversation with them about it. And I have the conversation with them around how we can still feed a really well-rounded diet to our dogs through rotation. And, if they're comfortable, and so I kind of try to talk them through that. But everybody, and look, she's president of the Veterinary Medical Association. So of course she's going to say, talk to your veterinarian. Mm-hmm. That alone is one of my biggest pet peeves that I will be honest, like I still don't 100% know how I want to address that on social media to the public. I think about it literally every day because so many of us and so many people on social media, their only comeback is, but my vet said, or you're not a veterinarian. And the reality is, I'm glad I'm not a veterinarian. I'm glad I didn't go through that indoctrination process, because I may not be where I am today if I did go through that indoctrination process. I can appreciate, and I do appreciate very much, the education that a veterinarian has received, their wealth of knowledge in the biology, the physiology of my pets, where they can help me if, heaven forbid, my dog gets hit by a car or my cat breaks its leg, or like, there are so many emergency situations, acute issues that, yeah, I want their help with, because that's what they're really, really, really good at. And I appreciate them for that so much. But it's kind of in their nature, and I've talked to so many veterinarians about this, they are pushed so hard in vet school to be competitive with one another, that they are competitive with the world. And they are, most of them, not all of them, are so competitive with the world that they're not even willing to admit where they don't know something. And maybe that is because they feel like they do, based on their pharmaceutical rep and their big pet food rep coming into the office and telling them XYZ. Maybe they feel that they know what they need to know. I think when pressed, a lot of them might have to admit that they don't know about nutrition, that they don't know about so many other modalities outside of just pharmaceuticals. Like, we don't need to give our pets petroleum for everything.
Well, and there's nothing more humbling yet more inspiring than hearing a professional say, I'm not sure, let me find out for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, like, I'm
good with that.
I'm not the robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that was programmed to know everything. I am not ChatGPT. I am not an AI bot. I can't tell you everything. Like, I got to go figure it out. You could catch me totally off guard and go, oh, I've never thought about that before. Let me look into that for you. That's how you collaborate with someone, and that's how you continue learning. And I have zero respect for people who don't have the ability to do that. So when I run into professionals, be they in the human space or the veterinary space, the animal space, who would rather stand up on that hill and die than admit that they don't know something, I'm not interested. I'll just walk away because you've lost my respect.
Yeah. I feel so strongly, and I know you do too, that if the only education you have in nutrition is whatever you got in veterinary school, which is so minimal, some veterinarians say, I mean, I've heard some veterinarians say that it's like one class, one semester, and whatever you're learning in that class is going to be whatever big pet food company is funding that veterinary school, whatever they want to tell you. Plus, possibly plus whatever a big pet food rep comes in to your office to tell you about their food and why their food is so great. So you walk into it used to be a thing I would say, like, if you walk into a veterinarian's office and you look at their degree, like where they got their veterinary degree, and look up what big pet food is funding that school, I promise you that's the food they're selling. I promise you that's the food they're selling.
Yeah. And I like hate even saying that, because it makes us look like jerks, kind of. If you don't know
I
us,
know.
we kind of look like we're harping, right? I really hardcore offended a veterinarian that with my video last week, where I was talking about like why this article is bad, is like the key points that I disagreed with, one of which were that, and I wrote it here as one of the things that I disagree with, is that they said in Consumer Reports that they consulted experts such as veterinary nutritionists and veterinarians. But the next logical question is, what nutrition education do they have? Because if it's based off of Small Animal Clinical Nutrition, which was founded and written by the Mark Morris Institute, who is the founder of Hill Science Diet, then the answer is not much. And like, you can't, there's so much bias, it isn't even funny. And this woman was so pissed that I would dare say that she or other veterinarians are essentially brainwashed by these big kibble companies who kind of get their hooks into them from the day they step into veterinary school. She
Mhm.
staunchly denied that there was ever any lectures from kibble reps, that no one ever talked about different kibbles for different diets. No reps came. There was no mention of, blah blah blah.
Wow.
And I was like, well, that's really weird because the most well-known holistic veterinarians in this space have completely laid themselves bare to tell us about how that happened to them when they were in school and how it took them years to realize how wrong and biased it was. And they share that they spent years treating animals that way. And once they realized that they were doing that, that they had shame and horror and frustration, and they had to go through all of those feelings and then share them with us so that we could understand their journey. And you're just going to sit here and say that that's all a lie. I don't believe you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
don't believe
know.
you. So
It's
that's a person who was offended. She got personally offended by what I was saying and couldn't admit that she was wrong. That's the kind of person that I don't respect. Because damn,
yeah.
I've said I was wrong a lot in my life.
No kidding. Oh my goodness. Right? Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Sorry, I
And
got off on a little tangent there.
well, no, I mean, I think, it's an important conversation to have, and it's a difficult conversation to have because I absolutely respect someone who chose to dedicate their life, because you're not going into veterinary medicine for the money, right? It's just,
No.
no, you're not. So I mean, I respect that decision and I respect that you care for the animals. I just am so anxious for you to find that moment where you
Yeah.
realize that, oh, maybe this isn't the way to actually affect change in these animals' lives in a positive way. Yes, you're making change in their lives. I just don't always think it's in a positive way. And to the point of the veterinary nutritionists, there's, first of all, so few of them, and I have yet to be impressed by a single recipe I've seen by a veterinary nutritionist. In fact, I have clients, and I know you do too, that bring me recipes from a veterinary nutritionist, and they are like crying, some of them, because of the amount of money they have spent on these recipes, and their pets are not getting better, possibly
chicken, rice,
worse.
green beans, and balance it.
Balance it. Oh my gosh, it's always balance it. Yeah, I know. And that bothers me so much because you sit on a waiting list, and then you spend so much money for, by the way, you can get Balance It on your own and figure it out on your own and not spend any of that money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Balance It. I don't want you to use it, but like, you can do that all on your own.
Yep. Ugh, that makes me
I don't understand. So, but that's because when you say you're a veterinarian, when you have the credential of a veterinary nutritionist, you are still being taught by the same system of put some food, doesn't matter what it is, it can be freaking shoe leather, and throw a premix in there, and it meets AAFCO minimum standards, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what they're trained to do.
Yeah.
So the good and the bad.
Yeah, the good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
So one more big thing that really stood out for me was that the president of the AVMA said in here that, be wary of raw food, be wary of parasites and bacteria, blah, blah, blah. We've heard it all before. Recommends cooking meat. But she also specifically stated that while some dogs may benefit from grain-free foods, there's no specific reason a dog would need a grain-free diet, and plenty of research to show that dogs digest grains well. I would love to see those studies, and here's why. If anybody on here does not know how an AAFCO feeding trial works, here is the criteria for you. You have to have at least 8 animals. Only 6 out of 8 of those animals have to complete the trial. In the trial, no more than 15% of body weight can be lost. Blood tests must remain within normal ranges, and there can be no signs of nutritional deficiencies or toxicities. So that is your only criteria.
And it's not even a full blood panel. It's only a handful.
Yeah, specific things. And it only lasts 6 months. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I could eat Ritz crackers for 6 months, and I'm not gonna show signs of nutritional deficiencies or toxicities, and I'm probably gonna have okay blood work because the body doesn't work like that. You could
Yep.
eat grass for 6 months. Okay, maybe not grass because we're not cows. But your body, you store things in your tissues. It's not, you do not need to eat, you know, 2 micrograms of copper and 20 milligrams of zinc. And, you don't need to have that every single day, or else the next day you're going to miraculously have 0 copper in your body and you're going to wither and die. It doesn't work that way. So the trials are not long enough, the sample size is not big enough, and the criteria is not robust enough. So I
Mm-mm.
don't like that they're going to quote things like use AFCO and have the, go um, we have studies that say that dogs digest grains fine. All you need to do to know that your dog is not digesting grains fine is feed them food with grains in it and then go outside and look at the gift they left you on the grass. It's big, it smells, it's soft. They are pooping out what you're putting in. And it's not
Mhm.
supposed to be that way. I don't need a trial to tell me that. That was
Yeah.
the last thing that pissed me off.
Well, and I think, you know, this whole grain-free thing is just,
Never
oh
gonna go
my
away.
Lord Jesus. It's never going to go away. It isn't. I don't want you to feed grain inclusive or grain free if it comes in a bag and it's dry. I don't want you to feed either one.
Yeah, just don't do it. Just don't do either of those things.
Well, and the only qualification for a grain-free food is that it literally doesn't have a grain in it. There's no there there's no there's no qualification for what they replace those grains with.
Like
So to say that,
legumes.
yes, but it doesn't even have to be, like, it can be literally anything they want it to be as long as it's not a grain. There's
Right.
there, there's no restrictions on it.
Right. But
So
you know that they're not going to replace it with something better, right? Like the
no.
protein that you need to synthesize amino acids that are good for the heart, I mean, so there's sure you're taking something out, but what you have to put something in its place. What could it be? Whatever you want. That's not great.
Yeah, it isn't great. So but yeah, this whole grain-free thing, oh my gosh. It has persisted and I feel like it's not going away anytime soon. Like there are still people today that will come to me and say, my vet said not to feed a grain-free food.
Yeah.
Like, oh
Yep.
my Lord.
I know.
Okay, we do have some questions and comments on Instagram. So let me
I
just
know.
scroll back and
Millie's
see.
Raw Life wants to see a close up of my books. Here they are,
Um,
Millie. I know your name's not Millie, it's Amanda. How do I do this? Here. So here are the faves. I got some of the faves. I've got some. There's Piper. That's a little ceramic. My husband made that. It's a little
aw.
ceramic thing he made of our dog Piper. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff in here. Some human books down here. Four Paws Five Directions. That's a fave.
Yeah. She also said, Millie's Raw Life says, I've seen a big increase in companies adding probiotics in their commercial raw. I have two. I don't know that I love it either, because exactly what Kara said at the beginning, there's no variety, there's no like variation, there's no, and
Yeah. What are the downstream effects? We don't know.
yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a lot that we don't know, right? Millie's Raw Life also says all the vets I've had have been competitive, even with myself. You're exactly right. I've had a vet tell me how essential corn and potatoes are to the diet. Lord Jesus.
Good luck finding non-GMO corn in this country, by the way. It
It's
doesn't exist.
not possible. I actually try really hard not to eat corn, but I will on occasion because I am from the South and corn is like a staple. And
I love
let me
corn on
tell
the
you,
cob.
so when I was growing up, it's like, this is my comfort food, okay? I will have a big heap of mashed potatoes with tons of butter,
Oh, no,
and
I
I
know
will
what you're gonna say.
crumble up cornbread, sweet cornbread into it, and then add some corn to that and mix it all up. And that is like, it has to be my favorite meal in the whole wide world. And I probably haven't had it in like 10 years, but it's my like Southern comfort food.
There are two kinds of people in this world. The people that mix their corn and mashed potatoes and the people that keep them separate. Jessica, we are two different people. Oh my God.
Gosh. I don't, I mean, I try really hard not to eat corn, but if I'm going to eat corn, that's how I'm probably going to eat it.
That's the way. Do it.
Okay. Millie's Raw Life, how do you feel about premixes without synthetics? I have feelings. What do you have feelings on, Kara?
What is a premix without synthetics? I don't know what that means.
Well, what comes to mind
Like
for
a
me
pre-made?
is like a Dr. Harvey's. That's what comes to mind for
okay.
me.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So there are some like four-leaf rover has some, I think, too, that you kind of, I don't know. But what came to mind for me first was Dr. Harvey's.
Was Dr. Harvey's. I think that it can be a good alternative for people who are intimidated, maybe don't have the time to do complete DIY, that are looking for a base to add something to. The problem I've run into is, first, it's expensive. Second, it tends to come out to a lot of vegetable matter. I've had dogs who were eating that, who were pooping like 3-4 times a day, and there are pieces of that dehydrated food still in their stool that's whole, not well digested. And I've had that with multiple clients. And we went through all of the things, right? Like, are you soaking it long enough? Maybe let's try hotter water. Like, do you want to blitz it in the blend? They still were having that problem. And I thought, oh, maybe there's a digestive issue. But as soon as we took that out and just took fresh veggies and steamed and pureed them, the problem was gone. So I'm not a huge fan, but I would still rather take that over a bowl of kibble.
Yeah. Yeah. I find the people that get on those like base mixes, like a Dr. Harvey's. And so, by the way, Dr. Harvey's has one that does have synthetics in it, and then they have another one that doesn't.
Without. Yeah.
So I obviously would prefer the one without. But what I have found with my clients that are using it is that it becomes a crutch. And so they wind up feeding the same thing over and over and over again for years and years. Yeah. And so we still wind up with dysbiosis.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Variety. Yeah. No, there's no bet. You could change your meat variety.
Yeah.
Sure. But where's your vegetable variety? And another thing about it too is you have to add an oil.
Yeah. Yeah. You do.
We know how
we feel about oils. Yeah.
I have a lot of feelings about oils. And if you really want to know, you could go to rawpodventures.com/blog and read my blog about oils. Or you could go to Jessica's profile and you could watch our live about oils.
Yes. We did have a pretty good live about oils. Millie's Raw Life says, kind of off topic, but I saw in your my recent video, I think, that I use the Mind Pet Platter. Is it worth the investment? I don't know what they cost today. I can send you a discount code that I have for it. But I love it. I really do. I want to almost always feed off of something flat for my animals. The only time I don't, I will sometimes use a pasta bowl if I'm adding a lot of like bone broth or something. Just because it's messy. Like, it has the ridges in it that catch the bone broth, but if your hands are at all shaky, you're gonna lose some of that bone broth. So
I have them too. I have for the cats. The large one is 45. The small one is 40. I have the small ones for the cats. I agree. You can feed off any flat surface. You can feed off of the plate that you eat your food off of. You could feed off a cutting board. It doesn't have to, but what I do like about this is she's very meticulous with her materials. So like there's nothing toxic in them. If you have an animal that enjoys what am I trying to say? Like kind of like the licking process, because if you like smush it into the grooves, that can be a little bit of enrichment that can slow them down if you're feeding just a grind. So that's nice. But be wary if you have an animal that gets a little bit obsessive or anxious if they can't get every last bit of food. Maybe that's not the best. You might not want to like squish it into those grooves. Like my cats, if it gets squished down in there, they will leave that last little bit because they are just not interested. So I I just plop it on there. I got it because I wanted to do an experiment and see if I could get one cat to pick one color.
Yeah.
That didn't work. So I got 3 different colors for my favorite cats, and they migrate to whichever one I put down first. So it didn't work for us. But it's still convenient, and it's really easy to clean if you have one of those scrub brushes. And I like to use the Project Suds dish soap, and I just and it gets in all the little grooves. It's perfect.
Yeah. I mean, I very much appreciate, because I've had Carol on a couple of times. I very much appreciate the amount of research that she did to try to make it more of an experience, so that it does mimic more what it would be like for an animal to like actually lick the meat off of the ribs and different, things like that. So I appreciate that a lot. And I do think that my dog does take a little bit longer to eat her food, versus if I just put it on a wooden cutting board or a pasta dish. Like, it's not a lick mat type situation, which Carol hates, by the way. It's not that kind of situation, but it does take her just a little bit longer, which, I mean, I think that's a good thing to do. So, cool. So Millie's Raw Life didn't know you had cats. I don't have any idea how, but
Amanda, I have 3 cats. And I had to kick them out of the room because they were being annoying. I just got back from a trip and they were excited to see me, and I immediately shut them out into this room so that I could do this recording. So
okay. So yeah, I think the good and the bad. So the good is that a lot of people, especially the older generations, do very much utilize Consumer Reports. And so having them do testing on dog foods may bring about questions. So it may have people asking more questions. I don't know how the younger generations even I wonder. I bet Gen Z doesn't even know what Consumer Reports is. So we'll see how this ages. But so yeah, getting people to ask questions, I think, is probably the best part of them doing this. And the worst part is the whole always ask your veterinarian. I think that's the worst part.
Yeah. The 3 worst ones were always ask your vet, always check for ethical guidelines, and then the last one was don't make a change to your pet's food once you find something that works.
Oh my gosh.
The last one that was the worst.
I forgot it said that.
Bullshiz, nizbaziz. It's a lie. I'm trying to keep it PG for Jess's page here. I swear a lot on my podcast, but no, it's complete bull. Please change your pet's food often. Not only do you want to provide variety, but this also prevents the development of sensitivities if there's any leaky gut. So change it and change it often.
Yes, I agree. Completely agree. Yeah. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up, unless you have anything else.
No. I mean, I have a lot of things to say, but only an hour to say them. So
I know, right? Okay, I guess we will. Are you going to join me next week, or what's your schedule?
I'm off all of the Mondays this month.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, if you guys have any recommendations or requests for topics, you can DM either one of us, because we will need to pick a topic for next week. I usually do that one.
Comments on this.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That would be great.
Yeah.
Please
comment on this. Tell us what you want us to talk about. We'll do some research and come back with some really great quips and maybe a few swear words next month. I mean, next week.
Next week. Yeah. All right, guys. Y'all have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next Monday. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Oh, they're killing my ears.
Oh no.
I had to get all new equipment because I left everything in Texas. So I'm testing everything out.
What AirPods did you buy?
They're just cheap, corded. I can't do AirPods. My ears are too small, and
yeah, mine too.